Then over here we have Slenderman. So I'll be posting a build video about him shortly. Well, actually, it's gonna be right now. Alright everyone, so we're going to start off this build with the base for Slenderman. So I used 3 2x4s, they were just scrap pieces, and a scrap piece of plywood that I had laying around, and I just connected everything together with drywall screws as always. So to get the body ready for building, I had gotten a Slenderman costume from Spirit. It was on clearance, so it was like 10 bucks. So I laid it down on the ground and then I measured out my dimensions by laying down some PVC pipe on top of it and then cutting it to size. And next I hammered all the pieces together with a rubber mallet, and then I drilled pilot holes and screwed everything together with some drywall screws to make sure that everything wouldn't flex since he's going to be bouncing back and forth. Now I did make the frame a little bit too large, and I'm going to talk more about that later in the video because it was the worst regret of my entire life. And next I laid the frame up on a garbage can and I began to dress it just to see how it would look. And you're going to start to see my mistake because Slenderman is more of a pancake man than skinny. He's a little wide, a little bit. So I'm going to take the bottom of his base and I used some pipe brackets. I think they're for conduit, and I screwed those in, and those are going to act as the hinge for his bottom. And then I'm going to stand him up and then just tighten them some more so that I can work with him without him falling over. And then on the top I added in some more pieces of PVC pipe. They're just little guys, and we are going to be making the mechanism that controls his arm movement. So he does have a hinge at his shoulders, and that is what is going to make his arm stick out when he leans forward. So this is what the arm motion looks like without all the clothes on. So the arms tilt just like that. So then I put his clothes on just to see how it would look, and I tilted it back. It's kind of why he's got like gangster shoulders, is because it needs room for the mechanism. But it worked out really well. So then I went ahead and I added another PVC elbow to that extra piece I had sticking out there, and I just put in a piece to attach his head to, and I screwed everything together. And to attach his collar, just because I didn't like the way it looked, I would poke some holes through the fabric of the costume and then just stick a wire tie through it and attach it to the frame underneath. And he fell over a couple times, which was annoying. And that's just how I got his collar to like stay popped. So I went ahead and I made his head the same way that I make the heads for all my props. So I put duct tape over a piece of PVC and a plastic bag full of other bags, and then I duct taped it to make it a head shape. And then I put a plastic mask over the bags just to give it like a face structure underneath the hood that comes with the costume. I ended up not using this and replacing it with a styrofoam head, just because you'll see how terrible it looks in a minute, and you can see all the seams and all the duct tape, and it just doesn't look good at all. And his head's not even round. But if you're putting a regular mask over it, using the bags as a head is a great way to go. So after the head, I went and added the collar that comes with the costume. It's kind of like a chest piece, kind of like a quarter shirt, and I tucked it in underneath his costume and just secured it so it looked kind of nice. And then this is when I realized that he looked nothing like Slenderman at all. This is when I started to get very upset. I thought the project was going to be a failure and I would just have to scrap the whole thing. So I decided to make his legs skinnier by cutting slits up the side and then wrapping the poles in some pipe insulation, which ended up making the pipes thicker for the final product, but it actually did not help at all considering just how wide the frame was. That was the only problem, was the frame was much too wide, which made him look all stretched and like flattened out. He didn't look like Slenderman. He looked like Slenderman got run over by a steamroller. It didn't look good at all. So I started to zip tie his pants to kind of make him look skinnier, and I realized even that wasn't working. So then I decided I had to take the whole thing apart. I had to remove all the PVC, all the screws, and I had to cut the entire width of the whole frame in half. And I fixed it, but I didn't film any of it because I was too upset. So there. I went ahead and I reattached his pants. They look great. I went ahead and I beefed up his arms a little bit with more pipe insulation, and I attached his jacket, although I cut it in half just so I can make it look a little bit skinnier, and then I zip tied it in the back just so it was nice and tight. He still has those gangster shoulders, but whatever, he still looks cool. So I'm just went ahead and redid everything I did before. I attached the head and then I attached the shirt piece to it, and it finally looked okay, and I was able to move on with my life. So once I was happy with the character, then I went ahead and I just pulled down his pants a little bit, oopsie, and then I drilled 2 holes in the middle support of the PVC frame, and then this is where the little bracket that attaches to the air cylinder is going to be attached. Now, I didn't want to use screws because I was afraid of it cracking, and I figured that some zip ties, they stretch a little bit if they're under heavy pressure. So I wanted to use zip ties because they might have a little bit more flex, especially because it is an air-powered prop and I didn't want it to be so violent. So I went ahead and used zip ties to secure that bracket onto the PVC, and it ended up holding it through the entire Halloween night. So I'll probably do it again, and it makes it really easy to take it apart so I can store it. Next, I went and attached a scrap piece of 2x4 to the base with some angle brackets, actually quite a few angle brackets, as this is where all the load from the air cylinder was going to be pushing against, so it needed to be super strong. So I went ahead and I think I used 5. I used 5 angle brackets just to make sure it wasn't going to move. And it flexed a little bit, but it actually didn't go anywhere, and I'm happy with how it worked. So I'm going to go ahead and do 2 more on the front, and then I used 1 big one on the back at the end. And I attached the other end of the air cylinder to that 2x4 that we just attached, using the bracket that it comes with and 4 little screws. And for the last assembly step, I attached an eye hook to the wooden beam that we just secured, and then I'm going to spray the entire base with flat black spray paint, the kind that you get for $1 at Home Depot, and just made sure I covered the whole thing. So there was one important thing I forgot to film, and that's this bungee cord hanging out of his back right here. It's actually attached to the shoulder mechanism at the top. I just looped the bungee cord around it, and then the other end of the bungee cord attaches to that eye hook that we attached to our wooden support in the back. Now, this step was really important because when Slenderman leans forward, the bungee cord will tighten on the shoulder mechanism, and that is what pulls his arms up when he leans forward. So one of the last things I wanted to talk about were the electronics that make him run. So these are all the components that I use to get his motion going and to control it with the motion sensor and the sound. So I'm just going to walk you through the components that you see here. I didn't have a video, so I'm just going to point out different parts of this picture. So to start off, I have a Peekaboo prop controller that I have attached to a wooden board, and that is attached to his solenoid valve. And that valve lets air in and out of the air cylinder that controls when he jumps out and when he pulls himself back in. And then attached to that, I have a speaker that connects right here, and that is where his scare sound is going to be coming out of. So by default, the solenoid valve has no power, so that means that Slenderman is in his default position. So when the motion sensor, which connects to the Peekaboo here, senses someone, then it will apply power to the solenoid valve, causing air from the intake from the air compressor to be pushed out of the outtake, causing him to launch forward. And his motion sensor is down here on the ground. So when you walk by him, that's what that sound is. It makes him lean forward. Alright guys, that about does it for my Slenderman build. You can see his head looks much better with a styrofoam head rather than the plastic bags. I think this was one of my more ambitious projects for the season, and a lot of people got scared from him, and I'm really proud of how he came out, and I'm definitely going to keep him around for a couple more years. So let me know what you think down in the comments, leave a like, even hit the subscribe button, or the notification bell if you're into that kind of thing. If you don't like the video, don't tell me, because it hurts my feelings. Alright, thanks, and happy haunting.